Let's take our seats. We shall continue. And I would like to call Henry Nash, IBM OpenStack architect. And IBM is one of the sponsors of today's event, so hopefully you will also touch some big issues with IBM Watsons and unstructured data analysis. Maybe we don't need to structure and open data. Maybe we could just handle it raw. Doesn't matter. Okay, please shoot off if the microphone is on. Okay.
That's good, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name's Henry Nash, I work for IBM. Although I spend most of my time in the OpenStack community, and that's really the subject of the talk this morning. I mean, we've already heard a lot about open data. I'm sure the rest of the day we'll hear a lot about the kind of policies around open data, what we hope for it, how we force governments to release it, etc. One of the reasons that IBM is so heavily invested in this area is that what is it that's going to host all this open data? And how can we have confidence in what is hosting that, you know, it remains open and we have access to it and we know who's looking at it? So I'm going to talk about OpenStack. OpenStack is a large open source initiative which is the premier cloud stack software in the world today now and will continue to grow. We'll talk about what it is. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it, how it's used, why it's relevant to what we're talking about today, and then a little bit about what IBM are doing to make that even better for the future. And so OpenStack, okay, it's the mission of the OpenStack Foundation is up there. It's a pretty audacious mission, basically to the ubiquitous open source cloud computing platform. So this is the thing that for, if you're putting up cloud services, if you're putting up data, then if you want an open source cloud stack, if you want the best cloud stack, you're going to run OpenStack. It is by far and away the premier open source cloud software and becoming the premier and most commonly used cloud software of any type, open source or not. And this is why it's relevant today to what we're talking about here today, is that this is what's going to host the stuff we're talking about. And yet, we can make all these regulations and rules and so forth, but we better be sure about some of these questions. Because, you know, if it's data, if it's government putting up their data, they'll want to know the answer to these questions. If it's organizations, companies putting up their data, if it's me personally putting up my data, I want to know some of these questions. I want to know what people are using it for. Is it freely available? Are people selling it or not? Is it being backed up? These are questions that we're going to have to answer. And if it's a proprietary set of software which we have no visibility into, we have to trust that whoever made that software, that what they say is true. And I don't think that's good enough. For what we're talking about here, we have to be able to publicly audit whatever software it's running on. And that's what OpenStack lets you do. That's why this is important here, because it's open source. Everyone has access to it. You must publish the source of what you're running. And this is what makes it incredibly powerful. So I will give you a little bit of intro on OpenStack, what it is, and then we'll talk about some of the usages, which I think will become apparent that this is going to be an engine under which a lot of the stuff we're talking about can be driven. So OpenStack's a set of cloud software designed to virtualize and provide cloud services, i.e. REST APIs, for all the common things that you have a cloud stack for, compute and network and storage and so forth. So it's a totally REST API-driven set of cloud software that's open source, that's run by most organizations today. Every single one of IBM's products that has a cloud stack uses OpenStack. Every single one. We stopped writing our own, just junked it. I'm not going to go into detail. This is about as detailed as the slide goes in terms of what's in OpenStack. is a bunch of services. And if you talk to OpenStack people, you'll hear things like, I'm running my Nova services over here. They gave each one a kind of funky little name. And it's really taking the things that you have to provide in order to provide software and data on a cloud, and each of those are independent modules that are provided in software. It's all open. Each of those have REST APIs, so you can write queries to find out what's going on inside your cloud software. Been around 5 years, this is its 5th year. Originally out of NASA and Rackspace, was kind of rolled out in 2010. Works on a process every 6 months. We release a new version of the software that's kind of formally blessed as a major release. However, there are many companies who pull directly on a weekly basis the source that's published in OpenStack and run that in production. There are companies who take whatever's been published latest, the latest release, not part of a major release, the latest fixes in production within 10 days of it being published. I mean, it's really kind of very dynamic and very agile from a perspective of people running this data. This is not the sort of stuff that I'm running Windows XP type scenario, even though I still do somewhere, in terms of companies run stuff that's very new. And the advantage of that is that, as we'll see later in the presentation, there are some very interesting new developments in terms of hybrid cloud, in terms of how we have access using common standards like SAML, which is a federated protocol, such that if I want to go to this cloud, I know how to speak to get my data. I can go to that cloud to get the data. I can combine these together if I want to provide some of the stuff that Ian was talking about this morning in terms of combining these things together. And those kind of standards are very important. And so those standards are great as long as you can get them in some software you can actually put up in a cloud. And it's not going to take 10 years for that federated protocol or whatever it happens to become available so I can actually call it to get my data. So the good thing about OpenStack is people run very close to trunk. You'll hear people talk, which means they're running very close to the latest and greatest code that's been put up that powers this cloud software. And I said earlier that, I think it is one of the premier, and this is kind of the stats of how it's grown. Just remarkable progress. This is the biggest foundation in open source. It's bigger than Linux in terms of the number of members in an open source foundation. This is not some little side thing. This is the premier, in fact, probably the premier open source product, let alone the premier stack open source product. 20,000 members, 61,000 commits in 12 months. Anyone's in soft development, a commit is where, you put a fix into some software or change to some software. 61,000 tested changes to improve the system in 12 months. That's almost, no single company could even come close to that, which again shows the power of an open source community in developing something that we're going to host open data on. It's been driven by a wide variety of companies. No one company has control, which ensures that we have, a common accepted standard, de facto standard for basis on which we can all share. And in terms of using it, it's kind of growing exponentially as well. Here are some of the people that are using it. Huge use, ironically, inside government and inside security services of people like that, because you can spin the stuff up very quickly. And I think we'll see, particularly in public sector, because of the cost advantages, as well as even in things like the financial sector, some of the places where you perhaps expect most resistance to this sort of stuff, we're starting to see significant growth now. So it really is across the board. And one of the poster childs is really CERN. Most people, we already had one reference to the Large Hadron Collider this morning. I didn't know that was coming. CERN are actually on the user council and are building a huge OpenStack farm to help process the data out of the Large Hadron Collider. They're kind of our poster child, big data, push us as hard as you can go, as well as being the fact that as an educational institution, they have to give access to their data to, several thousand educational institutions around Europe. They're funded to do that. They must do that by their charter. So they use all of the OpenStack's federation to allow all the different universities and different educational bodies to get access to that data without having to maintain a database of 100,000 users that someone has to look after. They don't do that. They provide federated access by trusting the institutions that if I come in that I've, with a token from University of Cambridge, then I'll get access to the data that CERN is providing from the Large Hadron Collider. And, some of the reasons why people are using that are listed here. I mean, there was a very famous, those of you who've been around the software business much, or in fact, for many businesses, the kind of, you can have faster, better, and cheaper, choose two, you can't have three. It's one of the kind of mantras that you've heard, we've all heard probably, in terms of when we're building things. In terms of most companies, they're changing that mantra to say, I just want it fast, fast, and fast. If you can give me that, then I can do it, I can make up the other two myself. If I can change my business really quickly, I can spin up thousands of VMs, or I can scale my data by adding more stuff. I'll make up new business models that actually get over the other ones. Just give it to me fast. It's becoming the mantra. And that's what something like a truly massively scalable cloud stack can do for you. That's why you see some of the largest companies which didn't exist, years ago, sometimes even months ago, are ramping to millions of users. I mean, there is no kind of procured proprietary software that can do that makes financial sense for a startup or even for a larger company. Cloud stack software that can scale massively like that may or may not providing open data or not, is the only solution to that problem, and that explains why it's changing some of the business models. And the larger enterprises, I mean, IBM are amongst them, obviously, are very supportive of this. We don't think it makes sense for a single company to own the cloud stack soup to nuts, IBM or not, for that matter. It just doesn't. You won't get the trust, you won't get the scale. No one company can provide the resources needed to provide the breadth of capability that's required for us to trust such a bit of software. It just ain't going to happen unless we do it in this fashion, which is why, IBM has decided to, stop shipping the proprietary stuff, and we ship OpenStack as our cloud stack. And you can get it on-prem, or you can go get it on SoftLayer. We're showing it, I think, next door. If you want it on demand, all those things are available. But that should be the way you get your cloud services. So I talked a little bit about some of the latest developments, and these are kind of relevant, I think, to what we are starting to talk about, which is, open data provided from one place is interesting. Being able to get access to open data from a variety of places and combine them together becomes much more interesting. That's where the value add is going to be. As Ian was saying earlier, you've got to decide what your value add is. And it may be just cleaning individual bit of data. Maybe there's some good, I'm sure there is good value add there. But I have to believe there's much more value add when you combine clean data together and bring out new types of inference. But to do that, you're going to have to access a bunch of stuff, a bunch of different places. And how is it you're going to have access? Gone are the days we want to be doing screen scraping, as was said earlier. And so one of the things that's been driving development in the identity part of OpenStack, it's called Keystone, that's the bit I work in, is, well, how do we enable the kind of federated approach to data access that you need in order to make open data a reality? And, we don't want to invent this stuff from scratch. A bunch of stuff has been done before in terms of providing, there are OpenID Connect, SAML, these kinds of federated protocols exist today. They're not in huge use. The biggest example of federation today is Facebook. We may not like it, but it's true. Facebook have done more to get people to understand what federation means than all our companies have been able to do on our own. Because people suddenly realize, oh, I can log in with my Facebook ID to this website. I don't have to create an account there. That's useful. That's federation. Now, we can have our own views on Facebook, but they've done more for federation and getting into the minds of the users than we all managed to do. So one of the things that OpenStack is doing a keystone in the last 2 releases and the next one coming up is really build on the federated models that are capable to do. So, for instance, and we'll be demonstrating this, we have our next, with OpenStack, you have a big conference every 6 months where we kind of show the latest wares and get together and design the next one. The next one's in Vancouver in April, where we'll be demoing some new use cases of this. But it's to be able to do things like, the kind of cloud bursting stuff if you're an enterprise, or more importantly, if I need access to different sorts of data, how is it that that CERN, for instance, an example, decides what data I should look at? Well, you need a way of deciding, okay, if you're coming in as a staff member, you get this sort of data. If you're coming in as a professor, you get this amount of data. Or if you're going into government websites, if I'm a supplier, I get this data. If I'm a startup company looking to resell that data, I get perhaps some other different view of it. And how do we handle the protocols of that? So, one of the things you can now do in the current release of OpenStack is do exactly this thing. I can have private data clouds on my prem, and I can use all community code, nothing proprietary. I can go to my local cloud, ask for a SAML assertion. SAML's this federated protocol that is kind of a standard. I can turn my local token into a SAML assertion. I can go to an OpenStack-based public cloud, or any other one that supports SAML for that matter, use that, and have access to data there. So this is all within the community code that's freely available from OpenStack. And that's really quite advanced from both the community code and even, from proprietary products. People have talked about hybrid cloud a lot for about 2 years now, probably more. But it's all been very, well, that works fine as long as you have this bit and that bit only. And we had a couple of months to kind of tweak the things underneath so that everything worked smoothly. And that's the only way hybrid works really today in practice. What we're doing here is driving in the kind of fundamental principles of federation to provide access to multiple different endpoints and clouds, which will be available publicly, which is where you'll get your open data from. And all those clouds run open source, so they can be audited. You can use REST APIs to find out what's happening to your data, and you can have confidence in the way that data is being handled. So that's kind of an intro of OpenStack. Some of the new things that are going on, which I think are pretty relevant to what we've been talking about here, the underpinnings of what will let us have access to some of this data. And so I'm just going to do a little bit about IBM's specific view on how to use some of those capabilities. Because we're not kind of new to this stuff. I mean, one of the, you may love IBM or not love IBM so much, but one of the things we are pretty good at, actually, is kind of, fostering leadership in open technologies, which is actually something that IBM has done very well. And OpenStack is one of the most recent ones we've done there. In fact, we're taking this further in terms of some of the things that go on top of OpenStack. But, we are, maniacal in our approach to making sure that things like OpenStack and the cloud software is run on a sane foundation, which with the right business practices, which means no one has an advantage, which means no one can get sued for it, all that kind of stuff that you've got to do if you want that open source to be successful. And, we put our money where our mouth is, basically. And so I'm one of the 19 people in that top circle by putting, a huge number of people to go work on this stuff. Open source, if you want to be successful, is not something you mandate that shall happen. You do it and it happens. I mean, that's how you get it done. And so, so we're not out there trying to, manipulate the kind of open source community. We're just putting the people in there to contribute to get it done. And that's how we become confident. We can base our businesses on it, and while other people can be confident, they can base their businesses and their open data upon it. We think actually there are many layers to take that further. OpenStack is, kind of, at the infrastructure as a service layer. If you want to provide, kind of higher level services on top of that, platforms as a service and then software as a service, there are other standards that you need on top of that. In fact, just like we help set up the OpenStack Foundation, which drives that as an open standards organization, we will set up the Open Cloud Foundry foundation to drive the next layer above that, which is in terms of platform as a service. So you can far more quickly deploy your applications to provide access to that data, for instance, on top of a piece of open source infrastructure as a service layer like OpenStack. And we'll continue to do that sort of thing because, again, we believe it's, if you're going to have an open data world, then it sure as hell better be based on a set of open source software that we can all have confidence in. And so, as I said, we're driving this hard, and putting an increasing number of people on this. Someone mentioned at a conference recently, if you're a technology company, then one of the questions you have to answer is, how are you managing your external R&D? So when I first heard that, I thought, what the hell? What do they mean external R&D? They mean this sort of stuff. Almost every company is going to be dependent on open source products like this. How is it you manage that? Are you involved? Are you getting your input into it? If we believe in open data and we want the facilitators, we must tell the people who are building the software what it is we want to be able to do to ensure some of those questions I had on my second slide. How is it do we want to have access to that? If we don't say anything, they might build it right, they probably won't. So we must tell them. Tell me, and I'll try and tell them. But we must be a part of that. So how is it, if we want open data to be a reality, we manage the external R&D who are going to build the underpinnings of that data? It's all our responsibility to do it. And so, as a company, IBM, as I said earlier, we're OpenStack all in. So whether you want to build products on site, whether you want to have them integrated into hardware, whether you want to go fire it up on a managed service like SoftLayer through there, it's OpenStack. That's it. So we take the community code, we put it up, we don't change, we don't modify that community code. We may put our value out on top of that. We don't touch that community code. It is what it is, so you can have confidence, and people should have. I'm not going to go through this in detail, far too complicated, I probably don't understand it anyway. But there are a couple of things where I wanted to give a hint at some of the stuff that companies can do, and it's particularly relevant to what we're talking about here, on top of that. So, how is it you're going to audit this stuff? How are we going to audit who had access to this data? And so one of the things that we've been doing is driving the ability to plug auditing into things like OpenStack and the things above it in Cloud Foundry. So CADF is a standard for kind of auditing messaging formats that's understood by and supported by a number of products. So rather than say, okay, we'll go build a product that's auditing for OpenStack, which we could do, we've said, okay, let's go define with industry the messaging, the notifications that OpenStack must issue, so that you can pump it into your auditing engine, whoever it happens to be. Do we have one? Sure, of course we have one. We have lots of stuff, but you can put into anybody's. So we have one called QRadar, for instance, which lets you plug that in. Other companies have their own one. The point is that the generation of that data is defined by the OpenStack code, not defined by the proprietary, any proprietary company. So if you are getting your data from an OpenStack-based cloud, you should be able to ask, I'd like to see the auditing records, please. You know, now, I don't think any of us are actually ready to say, okay, well, here's the portal that lets you just see just your thing. But that's what we're going for. That's what we've got to aim for. So I can ask to audit my data. You know, that's what we must be able to do. Now, we're not actually there today, but we're putting in place the pieces that will let us get there by making sure that the standard pieces are in the pieces that have to be agreed are in the open source software. And you can't say, well, that data is not available. Well, it is available. We know it's available. We know it's been generated. The fact you can't give it to me is your problem. And as an industry, we still have to get better at that in terms of making sure that all the products we build on top of that will give you access in the way that you want. That's back to the question. We've got to tell people like IBM, like who I work for, what it is we want from an open data point of view to have access to this data. Another one is a blank screen. It wasn't blank when on my computer, which is Tosca, which is, it's a build. It's a cloud standard for if you're going to have multiple different clouds and I want to have a process that runs across multiple clouds, how is it I define that? How is it I define something that I can then audit that says that happened on that cloud, that happened on that cloud, and that happened over there, and I didn't have to build something totally special each time in order to make that work. And so the last slide is that everything that I've talked about today is part of what we're driving as we call the open cloud, which is you must have the stacks, you must have the services, you must have the auditing, and you must have the APIs that are accessible from your products in order to be able to have confidence that you can host open data on that type of product. And we're going to continue to driving that. And, you know, as I said earlier, as open data proponents, please tell us what it is that we need to make sure we can ensure that's in the software. Thank you.
Okay, a big thanks to Henry Nash. Do you have any questions from the audience? Yes, please, I see one coming up.
Hello. Have you seen or done actual federated cloud systems that integrate not just identification but also provisioning services like networking, Nova, compute, etc.?
So have you seen federated systems that integrate not just identity but also provisioning services and so forth? So yes, there are some actually that do that. I mean, partly because the point about OpenStack is that the identity piece is the way in which all services in OpenStack are authenticated. So once you are authenticated with a federated protocol with OpenStack, you can go provision data, provision instances, you know, within the permissions that you've been granted as a federated user. And so CERN, for instance, absolutely provide that, for instance, since they allow people to fire up stuff and drive like data analysis on the kind of huge data sets that are being stored. So that's an example where you do provide that. And that's the advantage of using the federated within the cloud stack itself, because all those services will use the common authentication point, which is this called in OpenStack it's called Keystone. Once you're federated, authenticated, and you'll be authorized for a set of permissions, those permissions will let you have access, you know, if they're set up, to any of the services, data, networking, storage, object storage, and so forth. So absolutely, I mean, I think we're still at the early stages when you can have access to the full variety of things, but it's actually there. It's not actually a stack problem that's solved. It's actually a matter of, okay, well, I need to make a business out of providing something which has those services. So yes, there are people doing it today, and the base is there for people to build new businesses on top of that kind of capability.
Okay, that was a rather technical question, but a good one. Okay, anyone else? Right. Before I dismiss you, one maybe an easier one. Now, we have a lot of people from the government sitting here, and those solutions on the stacks, etc., they are created by the private companies. Sometimes it's their initiative, their own business, and sometimes it's some sort of a collaboration with the government, because I don't see if the government comes directly to that, if it doesn't have a capable IT departments, etc. Could you just name some experiences of how such a collaboration between the government institutions could eventually arise some solutions online?
Yeah, so as a precursor to that, we do see people try and do it themselves. People do, I mean, because it's the allure of open source. I mean, 15 years ago, I can't remember, my dates made it right, we used to download Linux from source and build it. I mean, people did. We don't do that today. And OpenStack is a bit like, we're not at that stage, we're kind of in the middle stage where the providers, the packagers of OpenStack are emerging. IBM, Red Hat, Mirantis, these are the people who are providing the equivalent to Red Hat themselves of what Red Hat and Novell did for Linux back then. So we see corporations and some government agencies who do roll it themselves, actually. They do download the source and just run it from the community.
From their infrastructure, their own infrastructure, from the cloud?
Their own, typically they run that privately on their infrastructure.
Yeah, right.
I think that'll become, I mean, that's good for a particular piece who can afford to do that. For most companies, that isn't going to be a sensible option in the way that isn't you do that for Linux either today. So, so what you'll find is that companies like IBM and others will provide, kind of packaged, for free versions of OpenStack, where we packaged it, we've run it, and we've tested it, and it's across these set of hardware. If you want it for free, go ahead. It's a bit like the data model. There's no charge. Go do that. If you'd like some more kind of analytics or value on top of that, yeah, okay, we're going to charge you for that. And so we see that kind of model working quite a lot, where we work with governments and we will provide, they take for free our distro, if you like, our packaged version. And then we'll have a longer discussion about, okay, so now you've got all this stuff, how are you going to manage it efficiently? How are you going to, integrate it into your processes? And those are the sort of stuff that a company like IBM or others will come and help you with. How is it you're going to provide a public portal to provide access to open data, for instance? OpenStack itself doesn't do that for you, it's just the engine. So we see, if you like, we provide resources to give away the bottom bit, if you like, to provide the value add on top. I mean, not kind of a new model, really. I mean, that's the way this stuff works. So we see that happening a lot, and I think that'll be a continued model for what we see.
Okay, let's thank Henry Nash. A big applause, please. Yes, here's a souvenir for you. Okay, we should move on. We're a little short of time, but anyway, a small announcement. In this very building and in this very hall, by the end of the March day, is going to be a special hackathon event. And the thing is that Riga City Council is releasing 50 data sets by the end of the March, and this hackathon will be the starting point of connecting to these new open data sets, end of the March. And more information is at garage48.org. Right, thanks. Now I would like to welcome Dr. Bastiaan van Leunen. And the thing is that your presentation has, in my opinion, some controversial name. The end of open data as we know today. Come on, we've just started. Okay, warm welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It's an appealing title, I guess, from a presentation. Well, I'm an academic working for Delft University of Technology, and I think the role of academics is also to inspire people and sometimes throw a stone in the pool. And in this instance, it will be the privacy stone, and I will throw into the open data pool. Well, let's see how much open data is left after my presentation. When I'm talking about open data, this is the complex definition of the Open Knowledge Foundation, and I added something in the back, in the bottom, number 10. Data should be freely available, for free. And for this presentation, I use a very simple definition of open data, data without any restrictions in the reuse, and provided for free. So open data goes a little bit beyond what the PSI directive is requiring, but that's what I am keeping here as a starting point for my presentation. And if we have open data, and I'm here replicating the presentations before me, we get increased transparency of the democratic process, economic and social value creation, 40 billion a year on the European level, according to Crane Vickery. Citizens are becoming more active in the governing processes, and government and also businesses are gaining efficiency opportunities. And especially the government one, examples of freedom of information requests going down significantly, at least for one organization in the Netherlands that allowed them to save 5 FTE in 1 year, simply because they don't have to process all these freedom of information requests. If you're talking about government efficiency in the quality, that's going up or down if you open up. The general impression is that the quality goes up, because wisdom of the crowd, there's a lot of wisdom out there. If you open up, you can take advantage of that knowledge. But you have to take action immediately after you get the feedback. And it would be nice, Ian, also to give some credit to the people giving you feedback. But the most appealing thing and the most appealing argument for open data is what Rufus Pollock mentioned here. The coolest thing to do with your data will be thought by someone else. Government will not think about these nice, innovative products. Example is here, a chocolate model based on the 3D open data that's available in the Netherlands. There's a prize-winning ID. The Netherlands was giving away this 3D model of Rotterdam, and those are cubicle houses. And there was one idea saying, well, let's put this data in the 3D printer, put some chocolate sauce on top of it, and there you have the 3D chocolate model of Rotterdam. And you could sell that to people as a Christmas gift or something like that. Something that the people in Rotterdam, the government people in Rotterdam have never thought about. Another example, like what Ian already said this morning, it's not that difficult. The US Food and Hygiene Authority is making all kinds of rankings of restaurants. And there was one bright guy who said, well, the rankings are nice, but just make it simple for also normal people to understand what the rankings are all about, and have the Don't Eat At app. If you go to a restaurant, you have the Don't Eat app, and you see, well, this is probably not the best restaurant to go to, because the kitchen is not clean, and I'm very likely to be sick after I've eaten there. Another very simple one is open license plate numbers, open in the Netherlands since 2013. And this Match and Catch app was developed by a company which is installed in gas stations. There are a lot of people using the gas station, and then free ride, go away without paying. And this app allowed them to check the license plate number with the type of car. So that if the license plate characteristics say it's a green car and the green car appeared to be red, then they blocked the gas supply. And that saved them a lot of money. Very simple idea, but this company is having a very sustainable business model on that. Just some examples. But of course, I'm not here to talk about the best practices, I'm also talking about the challenges. And digital agenda promoting open data, but open data cannot take place if there is some personal data involved. Because then the data protection directive applies. And the data protection directive provides the conditions. And one of these conditions is personal data can only be collected for explicit, specified and legitimate purposes and not processed any further incompatible with these purposes. So if we do the open data and privacy test, does open data qualify for specified explicit and legitimate purposes? What would be the answer? Yes or no? Well, pretty clear, no. By definition, open data does not have any conditions imposed. What I started my presentation with, no conditions in the reuse, no restrictions. So if there are personal data involved, forget about open data. Then the question should be, what exactly is open data, or what exactly is personal data? The directive gives a complex definition. I cited here literally. You can read it, I think. Information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person. And an identifiable natural person is one who can be identified directly or indirectly, in particular by reference to an identification number or one or more other factors that are related to this person. To make the complex language more simple, if it's possible to single out a natural person, an individual from your data set, then you should consider it personal data. Or if you are allowed or able to link the data with other data sets and then single out an individual person, then it's considered to be personal data. And you have to consider not only what you can do with the data, but also what others might do with the data. If others can single out the individual person, then still considered to be personal data. Article 29 Working Party, that's an influential independent advisory body to the European community. They developed a little bit more the concept of personal data, and they say, well, personal data is information about the person. It's information with the purposes to evaluate the person, or, not and, but or, information which use is likely to have an impact on a certain person's right or interest. And it should be noted that it's not necessary that the potential result may be a major impact. It's sufficient if the individual is treated differently from others. So if I get a direct mail, an advertisement in my mailbox for solar energy panels, and my neighbor does not get that information, and it's based on, let's say, the characteristic of my house, then apparently that data is considered to be personal data, according to this advisory body. If you look at the European Commission, they prioritized this summer several data sets as highest priority for release is open data. And among these data sets, geographic data, geospatial data are among the top priority. And I will focus the rest of my presentation on these. And I will start with an example, the value of a house. How many of you think that the value of a house should be considered personal data? Who says yes? Just raise your hand. If not, you don't care at all, yeah? Several hands, but not everybody? Well, let's make it market value. You change your mind then? Let's say it's the price of the house you should pay now. Who says personal data? That's one, let's say 10 out of 100? 10%, yeah. Well, the Article 29 group says the value of a house, well, it's personal data because the house is an asset of the owner, which will be used or can be used to determine the extent to this person is obliged to pay his taxes. and therefore this data should be considered personal data. Another example, an aerial image. Well, a little rather detailed. How many of you think this is personal data? Or should be considered personal data? Well, no, not yet, but it's digitally available. There are coordinates there, there's an address there. Nobody, there's one. Oh, we've got one. Well, you know more about this, I think. In Belgium, they consider this to be personal data, and that's the advice of the Belgium Data Protection Supervisor. They say, well, area images, they identify the parcels owned by individuals, and the owner of the parcel can be looked up in the publicly accessible land registries, and by that you also get the data on the value of the house, etc., and therefore this should be considered to be personal data. So personal data implies no open data, right? If you then look at the cadastral map, the property map, well, then the same story probably applies. Here you see the ownership, well, this is my house somewhere, the ownership, the border of my ownership, the house of the ownership. If you look it up again in the land registry, you will get my name and how much I paid for it, the interest rate I'm paying for my mortgage, etc., etc. So the argument here would then, if you follow the Belgians, still personal data. So no open data. If we then have the building and address register, which is open data in the Netherlands, the zip code is not included there, but it's relatively, well, it's highly detailed data, and they show here the address, the service of the property, the age of the building, the function of the building, and well, also this information can easily be, well, if the ownership information can easily be found in the land registry, so at least the data protection side people would argue that this cannot be open data. The land use map, so the map showing how the land is being used, either there is corn on the fields, or there is wheat on the fields, or cattle on the fields, anything like that. That's what the data protection officer of the Ministry of Economic Affairs, where this data set is being processed, he argues that, yeah, if you combine it with the cadastral map, you get the owner, and what is being grown on the field is an indication of the value of the field, so therefore open data is not possible because it's personal data. Well, I can continue and continue. Heat map, energy loss of buildings. Well, the one building is losing a lot of energy, the others not, so probably the people in the building losing a lot of energy are being treated differently in society than the others. Apparently personal data, no open data. Energy potential, there's a big hype here with solar energy panels on the roofs. One house is having more potential for this data, for these solar panels than others. Might be considered to be personal data. And then 3D topography, which is now open data in the Netherlands since April of last year, showing the location of the building to a certain accuracy. The location of the building, the content of the building, and if you combine it with street view, you get a pretty good view on how the building looks. If you follow the reasoning of the Belgium Data Protection Agency and also the German one, that should not be considered to be open data. So, what shall we do then? Well, maybe we should anonymize the data, because if we talk about anonymous data, then the privacy directive does not apply, and we can still do the open data policy. So this one is not going to be open data, apparently. Let's make the individual buildings, transform them into blocks. How many of you think this data set is not concerning any personal data? How many of you think this is fine? If you do this as open data, you're on the safe side. Nobody complains, especially the data protection authorities. Sorry? Redlining. That's a possibility with this data. So you're saying it's personal data? Well, Belgians again, and also the Germans are reasoning like this. If you have the data on a scale of 1 to 10,000, the map I showed was on a scale of 1 to 10,000, then it says there is a risk of harassment of natural persons, and therefore this data should be considered to be personal data. So apparently it's not possible to have this as open data. In addition, with anonymization, there is the risk that there is a lot of data being combined, the big data challenges. That's an example here. Oh, it's going too quickly. Yeah, it's getting there. Yeah. If different pieces, it's moving. Yeah. Different pieces of information, and individually they are not related to any individual, but together they give a pretty good picture of an individual, and that implies that each single single data set should be considered to be personal data, or at least they should take into account the data protection directive. Moreover, what's not possible today may be possible tomorrow, and if you're going to keep the data and process the data also tomorrow, you have to take into account what is possible tomorrow, and technologically also. So if you take a random image here, 10 years ago that would probably be very anonymous if you publish this in digital format on the internet. But now with Picasa, iPhoto, Instagram, you name it. It's getting yeah. Then it's very easy for everybody to identify the individuals, and with that, the photograph has also become personal data. And that's not only for this example, but also for anonymous data. For example, the UK crime map. They're publishing this data as anonymous data on a street level, let's say 8 measurements per street. But if you combine that with the social media data, police officers twittering where they're going to robbery and address X today, well, if you mix that all, it's possible technically. If you mix that all, then this anonymous data might be de-anonymized, and therefore it should be considered personal data. Data about zip code level, we generally, at least 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we considered to have that zip code level data as being non-personal. Zip code level, let's say an average of 20 households. But there has been a lot of research consistently showing that if you combine the zip code level data with other data sets, then it is possible to identify individuals uniquely. So also there you might have a question mark whether a zip code level data is really that anonymous. So if you then take the priorities of the European Commission, for release as open data, then there are a lot of crosses we already can put in there. Cadastral map, topographic map, energy consumption, statistics, you're not sure about it if it's presented on the zip code level, ownership and management data. Privacy issues will come into place there, and then probably open data is a big question mark. So that implies if 3D models are considered to be personal data, that this nice idea of the chocolate houses might not be developed because there is an individual with the right to privacy. And I'm wondering if that's the right conclusion. So from a reuse perspective, you can say, well, the definition of personal data is nice, it's technologically neutral, but in practice, the technological developments transform a lot of non-personal data into personal data. And then the question is, will there be any open data left? Well, it's not completely a sad story. There is a lot of open data available, not only in the Netherlands, but in the geo domain. There's a lot of highly detailed information available in the Netherlands. What I said, the 1 to 10,000 map is available as open data. The building and address registry is open data. The topography in 3D for the full country is available as open data. And why is that? I'm getting there. These data sets are being used a lot. 10 million times per month they're being downloaded. This is the building and address register. 1 million downloads per month for the topography, and the Dutch cadastre has not filed a single complaint about these downloads. So apparently there is a mismatch between what the data protection authorities are arguing and the law, and what's happening in practice, and the feeling of people, and the feeling of being the interference with the right to privacy. What the Dutch minister argued in opening up the 1 to 10,000 map was, well, only if the data controller understands that the data requester will be able to link the data, then it should be regarded personal data. While the data protection directive says something like the data should be considered if it's possible to link the data to an individual. And the Dutch minister simply ignored that reasoning. And the same with the Dutch court in a court case versus Google, and this is about the early image. There's well information, personal information, that's information related to the identifiable natural person. And in this case, it's only about an object. And because it's only about an object, there's no personal data involved. So Google, go ahead. And also the court ignored the statement in the Data Protection Directive, that it's not only you as an organization, but also the others that are able to link the data to an individual. You should take that into account, and the court ignored that ruling. So you see a lot of different interpretations of the Data Protection Directive, and that's why the European Commission came up with a new data protection regulation this time, and trying to harmonize the rules for data protection in Europe. And instead of deleting this by any other third natural person, they added it in the definition. So if you take this as the final outcome of this draft regulation, then nothing will change. And the examples I showed will still hold. But what's that? Last minute, sure. So we are thinking, why not choose the opposite direction? So instead of having that included, please delete the sentence by any other natural or legal person. Because then, it's getting there already, you shift the responsibility from the data processor without having any attention to identify an individual to someone who wants to identify the individual, and then the directive should apply and all the obligations from the directive should apply. And in that instance, open geodata will be possible. That's just an idea, and we are going to further develop and work on that in a new PhD project, safeguarding personal data in the open data world. We're looking for good candidates with this University of Latvia, good candidates, legal experts, just finishing their master's degree. If you find someone here, you know someone in this university, please let me know, and they can help us to bridge the difference between what society feels and how the law, what the law requires. So in conclusion, data protection regulations and open data in Europe, they bite each other. Technological developments transform non-personal data into personal data. Anonymization may help, but not always. And the question is, can we draw a clear and unambiguous line between personal and non-personal data? Or should we redefine the concept of personal data? And if we don't redefine it, is there a future for open geodata? Thank you very much.
Thank you. A rather disruptive view on some data, I thought, non-personal becoming personal. It was a good thing you mentioned. It was brought to court and they decided it's not, actually. Otherwise, we don't know actually where we end with this kind of tense. Okay, questions please for Bastian. Yes, I'm bringing the microphone.
Hi Bastian, thanks for a very nice presentation. So if I understand well, in Belgium probably OpenStreetMap is illegal, yes?
So can you rephrase that? Is it illegal in Belgium to process the personal data?
No. According to personal data, what you mentioned, probably OpenStreetMap will be something illegal in Belgium, yes? Because all this information which you mentioned are included in OpenStreetMap.
Well, that's the other point, of course. The Belgian Data Protection Authority advised on this issue, but they did not enforce. So they did not go after, well, OpenStreetMap, for example, but also the Flemish government. And that's one of the difficult things in this domain, that the advisors do have some status, and a lot of organizations are building on that advice, but as the Dutch Data Protection Authority has the same kind of reasoning, but also is not doing anything. So then government is free to go. So that's tricky. Enforcement powers of the Data Protection Authority, they have very few people working for them. That might not be good, but in this instance, you can argue that is okay.
Right. Okay. Let's thank Bastian for a great and inspiring speech regarding that some of the data is still protected. We have one more question. Yes, please.
One short question. Should the salaries of government employees be considered as open data?
You mean the records of an employee?
I mean employees, salaries of government or public sector employees, for instance, government employees. Should these salaries be considered as open data?
That's an interesting question.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
I know in Sweden that is considered to be well, at least publicly accessible data, but in the Netherlands we consider it to be very personal data, and we're not publishing it as publicly accessible data. So that depends on the context of the country and the culture of a country. And as you may know, if the data is not accessible according to the Freedom of Information Act, then also there is not a right to reuse. So that in these instances it cannot be open data. But apparently in the Swedish instance it's accessible, and therefore there should be a right to reuse. But I can imagine that there will be additional requirements in the further data processing. So to give a short answer, no.
In Latvia, this is open data.
Okay. Yes, maybe in, I don't know, Finland and Estonia as well. But anyway, it's a tough question. The state individual, the person who works for the government, is spending the money of the state, actually, that belongs to the people, etc. But he's clearly identified, so it's a tough one for you as well, right? Okay, here's a nice souvenir. Thank you very much. Warm applause to Bastian. And we should move on, and I would like to welcome Karel Charvat. Yes, you are here. With a speech on open geospatial data initiatives, and he's from the Czech Republic. Please. The stage is yours. You can find your presentation F5. You can press. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like thanks to organizer to give me chance for my presentation, and I think that I also would like to thanks Bastian, because his presentation could help me ask some introduction about the problem. I will now look on some effort running in Europe, and I will also try to tell you about some our experiences with I think that okay, so
no. Okay. now it works.
Oh, but not here, seems. I,
Next one. And next one, yeah.
but it is not changing on the screen.
Well, I can't help you about that.
Okay. So it seems that I have to look back what is there because it is not changing from the screen. So I will try to speak about. Now it changed on the screen, not on on the top. So okay.
This is a tricky one.
Here.
It does what it wants. Okay, it's a nice. Yeah, now it changes there.
Okay, so hope that it finally will work. So at the first, I would like to speak a little about INSPIRE. Probably all who are dealing with geospatial data know what is INSPIRE. I would like to mention Copernicus, GEOS, what is now running in so-called VGI, Voluntary Geographic Information, and on the end I would like to mention some practical experiences from previous Plan for Business and Plan for All initiatives. So, Bastian mentioned a lot about the GI from the point of open data and also about some restriction related with the personal information. In Europe we have INSPIRE directive. The preparation of this INSPIRE directive was relatively long and the idea was to build some common European infrastructure to harmonize data across Europe and also to make easy access to the data. The work on the preparation start around 2000. There was some preparation period when the INSPIRE development started, and at the April 2007 was accepted INSPIRE directive. There were long fight about INSPIRE directive. And on the end, it was necessary to change some rules to be accepted by all countries. And the main rule which was problematic was about opening of geospatial data. Initially, there were ideas that most of geospatial data will be open, but on the end, it was not accepted. So, on some way, the opening of the data depend on the country decision. So in reality there is no exact rules defining that the data has to be open. I think that it is one from the weakest point of INSPIRE directive, and really if you will look on the implementation in different countries, you will see that there are very big differences in understanding. But what is telling in INSPIRE that the data which are the part of INSPIRE has to be free for public sector. So, if one public organization is using the data which are the part of INSPIRE, this data cannot be paid, yes? It has to be available for public sector free. This is one from, I think, a very important issue, and I know that in many countries till now is this not respect. Or there is discussion about different type of data, if this data are really according INSPIRE, and people are looking for arguments that this data are not according INSPIRE, and there is no obligation to share this data. The work about INSPIRE all time continue, because in this 2007 there were only this directive, but this directive is short and a relatively poor document. So then start to be built a lot of technical guidelines how to build and define INSPIRE. The first guidelines were about metadata, and I think that from the INSPIRE directive is obligatory for every country from 2011, I think, to have all metadata related to the INSPIRE data freely accessible. I know that a lot of countries not fulfill this requirement in the time, and I think that in some countries it is still now not available. But generally, not data, but metadata about geographic data has to be openly accessible. So this is one from important things. There is other problem now, because with the moving of Open Data Initiative, there are defined different standards for open data, and it is not very easy to transfer the metadata according INSPIRE specification to the specification of open data. So there is sometimes a little tricky task. We have in most of countries already the metadata about geospatial data, but usually these data are in different format and different services than is used for other type of the data. Other things, what was defined was the structure, the data format or structure for exchange of information. In INSPIRE, there is defined 34 annexes for different teams, and for every team is defined the structure for exchanging of the data. It is not obligatory that inside of country you use this structure as a format for storing of the data. It is impossible because there are different laws about cadastre, about could be spatial planning data or other data. So it is not possible to define that you will have all your data in every country in the same format. But if you are sharing this data with European Commission, with other, there is this format which is obligatory for all this 34 data team. These documents were already accepted, but now is the discussion about some update, because after some period of testing there were recognized some problems with some specifications, so the work continue about this specification. Last, there is the definition of the type of services. What is already accepted is visualization services. They are in principle based on the standard WMS, you know. There is already accepted also the standards based for downloading services, how the data could be downloaded. It is based on OGC specification WFS, if you will go, but the most of data across Europe is not published for downloading across, about the specification. In reality, some data are more exception to have these downloading services. Visualization services are published very often in many countries, but for example, for some usage for building of application, the usage of WMS is very limited because WMS sharing only image, yes? There is some print of the maps, so you cannot run any type of analysis. You can visualize this data, but you cannot run with this any type of analysis. So this is still now some limitation. INSPIRE is directive, but we have other effort. We can mention Copernicus. In the past, it was called GMES, Global Monitoring Environment Systems. Then it was the change on the Copernicus, and the goal is to build some set of services and data sets which will be available across Europe. On one side, here is advantage that you have something common for Europe, like Corine or other. On other side, the problem is that this pan-European data is difficult to use on the local level because the accuracy of this data is not so high to be possible to use it for many things. Could be some data are useful or could be used like urban atlas, which maps land use or land cover in all European cities bigger than 100,000 citizens. Corine could be used for some generic purposes. There is a lot of other data which are available, but on the local level it's not easy to reuse. It is expected that there will be start a set of services in the future. Part of these services will be free, but there will be also paid services, could be on-the-demand services provided by organization making satellite images or their interpretation. Other initiatives which has to be mentioned is GEOS, Global Earth Observation System of System. This is built on, could be in the relation to United Nations. There are countries, some countries are members of GEOS, some not, and GEOS is much more as a voluntary initiative. Yes, so GEOS is building mainly the GEOS registry, where anybody can register the data and services around the world. From one side it's nice, but from other side there is problem like with many catalogs, because you can register some service, some data, and if you will not continue managing this data, the services, the records stay in this GEOS registry, and when we tested this, approximately, for example, 40% of links to WMS services is already not working. Yes. So this is some weak point of this GEOS, but now there is a big effort on the side of the GEOS, improve the situation, providing some testing of this registry, availability of the services, and they are also running some pilot around the world related to different topics to improve the GEOS registry, but also improve the services based on GEOS registries. If we are discussing about open data, as on one side are public initiative, but on the other side there is a lot of also could be voluntary or citizens initiatives, and one from the most popular and most known initiatives is OpenStreetMap. It started really on the base of volunteers, because there were problems with topographic data, street data. So people start, like with Wikipedia, people start to collect data together around the world and put data together. And in some way, it is now the huge database. There are of course some problem, because any voluntary information could bring some problems, but in reality till now it is, for example, only available street network across Europe, which is really connecting all countries, is openly, not commercial, because there exists commercial system, but as open system, the OpenStreetMap is only street network across Europe which cover all European countries. Yes, but of course the quality of the data depend on the community in every country. In some countries also public bodies make some data available for OpenStreetMap. In other countries the situation is much worse. Unfortunately, Latvia is probably not one from the best countries with OpenStreetMap, but Street Network is here relatively good, but there are also other parts in this system, and for example, information about buildings are here on a very low level. In some countries, there are included full address registry, because in some countries this address registry are as open data and were integrated into OpenStreetMap, but in other countries it is not possible. So really the level of detail of this information is different in every country. And of course, what we are now trying is to find some link between these voluntary initiatives and this INSPIRE. As I mentioned, OpenStreetMap covers many information in different countries, but the format of the data was not designed initially by people from GI world. It was really much more related to the different style of tagging, etc. So sometimes it's a problem to use this data together with data coming from the INSPIRE. So for example, we are now trying to find the transformation scheme allowing transform OpenStreetMap data into the INSPIRE format. It is not possible all, but in some way, for example, Street Network or other information could be transformed from OpenStreetMap into the format of INSPIRE, and then you are able to merge the data. And also, of course, it's necessary to thinking in opposite direction, for example, to be able to take INSPIRE data and transform this to OpenStreetMap format. What is a little problem is licensing, because as many open initiatives, OpenStreetMap use some type of viral license, and in reality, any data which you will put together with OpenStreetMap and which you will make publicly available, also in other format, has to be based on the OpenStreetMap license. And very often there are differences about the licenses of the data in some countries and with OpenStreetMap. If the country data are published as public domain, there is no problem, but if there are any restriction for the data, you have problem to merge the public data with OpenStreetMap. And I would like to mention on the end a little about our experiences with one project which we already finished. You can here see the logo of more projects, and I think that Maris afternoon will speak about this, but we ran in last 2 years a project plan for business, and the goal was to try to use open data coming from public sector for businesses. Okay, there are some open data on the level of Europe. Eurostat is now very open. Any statistics are now open. When we ran this project, there were mainly in this time as Excel files. Now already all the statistics from Eurostat are in RDF form, so it is now easy to deal with the data. But again, it is not 100% true, because Eurostat publish all their data as RDF, but only as RDF file without Sparkle endpoints. So only chance if you would like to work with the Eurostat data is to download data to your server, put this data into some Sparkle endpoint, and publish this data as Sparkle query. So again, something what is not 100% correct. What we recognize really, and it is in the relation what Bastian mentioned, that there are very different policy with the opening data. In the Czech Republic, the cadastral maps are open data. Although information about building excluded information about owners, are open data. So there are registry which you can download, which you can combine, and these data are open. But for example, in Czech Republic are not open spatial plans. In Norway or Ireland, you can download any spatial plans and you can integrate this with other information. So there is the big problem to go through all Europe and build one system allowing access to any information, because till now we have INSPIRE, but the rules for accessing of information across Europe are very different, and you are not able to prepare the same application for any country in Europe. As the end of this Plan for Business project, we established from the partner association Plan for All, and now we will be open for other members, and the idea is to share open geospatial data and support building of interfaces, API and application across Europe on the base of this data which are available, because what we recognize in many cases, using this original INSPIRE services is impossible for the non-GI people, so we are now trying to put data together and be able to publish this data in some high-level APIs which could be used for non-GI developers. So this is all from my presentation.
Yes, a great one. I can now see why did you ask those questions to Bastian. Your presentations are indeed connected from that perspective. Questions, please. Okay. Do I see a hand there? No? Not yet. Right. You mentioned two things I kept in mind. Now, one thing is that you said that open data at some point was a public initiative. The open data was a public initiative regarding the geo information in Czech Republic, probably. Was it really that case?
We have public directive which could help to make some data open. This is the INSPIRE, but of course to do something with open data depends. In some countries, really, opening the data is public initiative. Norway, Czech Republic, Dutch was mentioned, yes. They are building the policy for opening geospatial data. In other countries, they are very restrictive, yes, and there is push, but usually government is not willing to do this. It was discussed yesterday that one reason is that many government bodies is not able to cover all costs with managing of the data sets, so they are asking for the fee for the data.
Some services can be asked some fee, especially if it provides some additional value to that data, some analytics on top of that. In that case, we warm welcome such solutions. That some part of the data should be free and some should be like. And
I mentioned this yesterday on the discussion. Yes, for example, with the Czech cadastre. You can download anonymous maps free. It really as WFS, all country is possible to download. You can look on some information to address registry to other, but if you need to have legally approved data from the cadastre, you have to pay. So there is some freemium model by the cadastre for offering the access to the data. So this could be probably one from the way, but usually this information is already related to private information also, and there are of course some limitation or rules how you can access this data.
Okay, thank you very much. A big applause to Karel. Okay, the next part is the award presentation. Latvian Open Technology Association is going to give awards to a very special companies, organizations, and persons. This event will be held in Latvian language, but I'm sure you will be able to understand a lot of the things going on the stage, especially I think we even have a slides in English. Good one. Yes, okay. Dāmas un kungi, tālāk es runāšu latviešu valodā, un Jānis Trejs jau ir atnācis šeit kopā ar mums, un viņš arī būs viens no tiem, kas, teiksim tā, pasniegs balvas un suminās ieguvējus. Un balva tiek sniegta jau 2. gadu pēc kārtas, un ir 3 ļoti īpašas nominācijas: atvērtākā iestāde publiskajam sektoram, izcilākais atvērto tehnoloģiju risinājums biznesā tieši privātajam biznesa sektoram, un mēs apbalvojam arī fizisko personu par ieguldījumu, par būtisku ieguldījumu atvērto tehnoloģiju popularizēšanā. Un pirms es aicinu cilvēkus, kas pasniegs balvas, un mēs teiksim skaidrībā ar nominantiem un ar balvu ieguvējiem, es tikai gribētu nolasīt arī vērtēšanas kritērijus. Jūs noteikti interesē, pa cik šeit bija iepriekšējās prezentācijās arī slaidi par to, kas tad ir atvērti dati un kas nav un kā to visu klasificēt, tad kādi tad ir tie mūsu vērtēšanas kritēriji. Tātad tehnoloģija atvērtība, sadarbspēja, atkārtota lietojamība un atvērta industrijas standarti. Un šo jūs noteikti redzējāt iepriekšējos slaidos. Tehnoloģija kvalitāte, efektivitāte un drošība tiks vērtēta. Tāpat arī tiek vērtēta brīva un godīga konkurence tehnoloģija izstrādes un piegādes jomā. Un ļoti svarīga lieta arī panākt Latvijas sabiedrības labvēlību pret atvērtām tehnoloģijām, tādiem risinājumiem, kas ir balstīti uz šiem atvērtajiem standartiem un atvērtā koda risinājumiem. Bet arī ar slēgtu pirmkodu, ja viņi ievēro zināmas atvērtības standartus. Tātad, iepazīstoties ar 2014. gada pieteikumiem, un tādu bija visai daudz, Lata valde ir noteikusi 3 nominantus un arī galvenos balvas ieguvējus šādās kategorijās. Un mēs sāksim ar kategoriju publiskais sektors atvērtākā iestāde. Tātad šeit uz ekrāna ir 3 nominanti. Kocēna novada dome par atvērtu standartu un tehnoloģiju izmantošanu ieviešot geogrāfisko informācijas sistēmu un virtualizētas, datorizētas darba vietas. Mums ir Latvijas Republikas uzņēmuma reģistrs. Jā. Par publiskā sektora datu atvēršanu sabiedrībai, piedāvājot informāciju par reģistrētiem subjektiem lejupielādēt jebkuram interesantam bez maksas. Un mums ir Smiltenes novada doma par atvērtā koda programmatūras plašu pielietojumu Smiltenes novada domē un pakļautajās iestādēs. Un šo balvu un atzinības rakstus pasniegt es aicinu Uģi Ēriņu, IBM Latviju vadītāju. Lieli aplausi lūdzu, jo IBM ir ilgadējs šīs konferences atbalstītājs. Tātad, Uģi, tu droši vien vēlies arī teikt kādu vārdu par...
Jā, es atļaušos teikt angliski. I want to say thank you to all the presenters that came today and yesterday to our country. Don't be confused by a relatively low number of people in the hall. Yeah? I was the one who was watching this in the morning online. Yeah? Very good quality and all the, I would say, all the presentations were in very good quality, so I believe audience was much bigger. And that's another indication of our openness today.
Okay. Lūk, un Uģi šeit un Jāni būs tātad atzinības raksti. Mēs sāksim ar atzinības rakstiem visatvērtākajai publiskajai institūcijai. Lūdzu, izsauc. Kocēna novada doma, lūdzu, šeit. Atzinība. Tātad, nāciet lūdzu šeit, lai jūs var nofotografēt. Jā, nu tā, lai visu to smuki redz. Tā dzīvīgāk aplaudējam. Jā. Un otrs atzinības raksts. Lūdzu. Mikrofons izsauksi. Uģi.
Jā, un tātad 2014. gada atzinība par izcilu atvērtības principu ievērošanu, efektivitāti kvalitātes nodrošināšanā arī Smiltenes novada domei.
Aplausi! Kocēni un Smiltene. Šo novadu domas ir šogad izdarījušas lielu ieguldījumu atvērtākā sabiedrībā, atvērtākos datos. Tepat nemūkam bildi kopā. Jā, ļoti labi. Un, kā jau jūs varat iedomāties, Uģis tagad nosauks tos, kas tad ir Grand Prix ieguvēji. Tu nosauks. Uģis, lūdzu.
Un tātad galveno balvu par publiskā sektora datu atvēršanu sabiedrībai, piedāvājot pamata informāciju par reģistrētajiem subjektiem, lejupielādēt jebkuram interesantam bez maksas mašīnu lasāmā formātā. Un šī balva pienākas Latvijas Republikas uzņēmumu reģistram.
The Grand Prix goes this year to the State Register of Enterprises for opening data of the State Registered Enterprises. Lūdzu, viena skaista kopbilde. Jā. Ļoti labi. Vai uzņēmuma reģistrs kā Grand Prix ieguvējs vēlas teikt arī kādu vārdu?
Jā, noteikti. Pirmkārt, paldies Latai, kad ievērojāt mūsu veikumu. No tehniskā viedokļa varbūt tas nebija nekas ļoti sarežģīts, tikai periodiski nopublicēt CSV failu. Taču smagākā daļa bija šis domāšanas veids, kā atvērtie dati ir jāatver nevis kaut kādam konkrētam iemeslam un jāsaprot, kāds ir šis iemesls, bet jāpajautā sev, kāpēc to nedarīt un vai ir iemesls kaut ko tādu nedarīt. Jā, paldies!
Sirsnīgi aplausi vēlreiz! Paldies jums! Un nākamā nominācija mums ir biznesa sektors, jeb privātais sektors. Tātad mums ir 3 nominanti Easy One par biznesa inteliģences produktu EasyBI izstrādi, ITH Group par Lolita CMS, Ruby on Rails balstīto atvērtā kodu saturvadības sistēmas izstrādi un apvienība no SIA mērniecības datu centrs un SIA ģeodati par datu pieejamības veicināšanu produktā Topogrāfija LV. Balvu pasniegt gan atbalstītāju atzinības rakstus, gan balvu es aicinu pasniegt gustu muzikantu. Latvijas arī ir mūsu konferences atbalstītājs. Silti aplausi Latvijas. Un dosim tādu mikrofonu un atzinības saņēmēju.
Jā, es varbūt pāris vārdus gribu pateikt no Latvijas. Jāsaka, dāmas kungi, man bija ļoti interesanti paklausīties šīs dienas runātājus. Un es gribētu teikt, ka Latvijas ar sadarbības partneriem, dažus esmu redzu arī šodien šeit zālē, pagājušajā gadā uzsāka tādu iniciatīvu, kuras saucas Latvijas e-indeks. Un Latvijas e-indeks īstenībā doma ir apskatīt, cik Latvijas valsts iestādes un pašvaldības ir attīstīts e-vidē. Un viena no tādām interesantām lietām, ko šis pētījums parādīja par 14. gadu, ka no 119 pašvaldībām 12 pašvaldības ir vai nu uzsākušas, vai nu gatavojas uzsākt kaut kādus projektus attiecībā uz atvērtiem datiem. Un mans tas nolēmums būtu, kad mēs taisīsim Latvijas e-indeksu 2015. gadam šim. Es redzētu vismaz kāds 50-60 pašvaldības, kuras būtu sākuši kaut ko darīt atvērto datu jomā. Tas tāds īsts varbūt ievads, un jā, tad es aicināšu nominantus, un kā pirmo atzinību saņem SIA Easy One. Okay. Tad kā otrs atzinības raksts saņem SIA ITH Group. Lūdzu, pārstāvi. Sveicu. Jā, nu un tad droši vien intriga ir ļoti liela saglabājusies, kurš tad varētu saņemt galveno balvu, bet tad galveno balvu saņem SIA mērniecības datu centrs un SIA ģeodati, kā lūkšu pārstāvus uz skatu, un tad iet runa par to, ka ir uztaisīts projekts vietne topogrāfija LV, kas ir interaktīva Latvijas karta, kur ļoti labprāt izmanto gan mērnieki, gan pašvaldības un arī citi individuāli lietotāji, un cik es saprotu, ir kā 240 lietotāji. Tā kā es jūs apsveicu. Un tad varbūt pāris vārdus kaut kā jūs sadalīsiet.
Jā, paldies Latai par balvu, tiešām liels pārsteigums, un tas tik pierāda to, ka pirms neilga laika izvēlētais risinājums ir bijis pareizais, un tieši atvērtās tehnoloģijas paver šo iespēju attīstīt vēl tālāk un vairāk. Paldies!
Paldies! Sirsnīgi aplausi! Privātais sektors par savu ieguldījumu atvērtāko tehnoloģiju izmantošanā, bet nākamā nominācija mums ir privāta, jeb fiziska persona. Par fiziskās personas ieguldījumu atvērto tehnoloģiju popularizēšanā. Mums ir 3 nominanti. Māris Alberts par līdzdalību ar tehnoloģiju drošību saistītās LATA aktivitātēs par internetu vēlēšanām un tā joprojām. Andris Gabranovs par atvērto tehnoloģiju ieviešanu ekonomikas un kultūras augstskolā un Alberta koledžā, un Rudolfs Mazurs par apjomīgu atvērtāku pirmkodu programmatūras lokalizāciju latviešu valodā. Kas tik tur nav? GNOME, Vid, Firefox, LibreOffice un citas. Un balvu un atzinības rakstus pasniegt es aicinu Jurim Vilderam, DPA valdes loceklim. Lūdzu!
Paldies! Pirms es pasniedzu atzinības rakstus un balvu, es gribēju pateikt paldies Latai par to, ka jau 2. gadu pēc kārtas mums uzaicināja atbalstīt Lata gada balvu. Šī ir DPA mīļākā kategorija, jo ja iepriekšējās 2 balvu kategorijas bija, kur mēs suminājām cilvēks par to, ka viņi labi dara savu darbu, tad šeit mēs atbalstam un izceļam privāto iniciatīvu, kur cilvēki ar savu iniciatīvu ir izdarījuši kaut ko labu, ne tikai sev, bet arī visai sabiedrībai kopumā. Tā, paldies Andrim Gabranovam. Māris Alberts par būtisku ieguldījumu atvērto tehnoloģiju popularizēšanā, pateicība numur 2. Un galveno balvu iegūst Rudolfs Mazurs par apjomīgu atvērtā pirmkodu programmatūras lokalizāciju latviešu valodā, tādējādi popularizējot tās lietošanu. Lokalizēta tika GNOME vide, Firefox, LibreOffice un citas lietas.
Vienu kopbildi sastājieties ciešāk klāt. Jā. Smaidam. Jā, siers. Nu ko, paldies visiem. Rudolf, vai tu vēlies kādu vārdu arī teikt?
Paldies, protams, ka novērtējāt manu darbu. Arī man prieks par to, ka programmatūras latviskošana un lokalizācija vispār tiek novērtēta. Man arī prieks to, ka es neesmu vienīgais šajā laukā, un es arī gribētu izteikt atzinību par Firefox arī viss vārds teiktās aizmirst. Raimam Dejusam par VLC Ingmāram Dīriņam un arī par Inkscape tulkošanas pienesumu Jānim Eisakam. Tā kā mums ir daudz, un paldies, ka vajadzētu dot balvu visiem, bet paldies, ka esat izvēlējušies arī mani.
Paldies jums, dāmas un kungi, ladies and gentlemen. Rudolfs Mazurs, the most significant contribution from a private person into popularizing open data, open technologies, and open source. Right, we are now going to commence our lunch, and lunch will be held downstairs, am I correct, Yanis? Yes, downstairs, at the basement level. And later on, after the lunch, precisely at 2 o'clock, you will spread in 2 groups. You have probably already chosen session 1 and session 2. And session 1 will be held here in this room, and session 2 will be upstairs in room number 14. Anyway, both of the groups should meet here at 16:45 for the conclusions and final remarks, and also join for the glass of wine. Okay, bon appetit to you. Bon appetit to you all. We meet all together at 2 o'clock sharp. Thank you. Un tātad